Welcome. Thank you for joining this session. Really appreciate your attendance and your interest in the topic. I'm going to do this right now. Well, first of all, my name's Chris. I'll get into that. But who has used Visualize here? Most of you. Because I gave this entire presentation last year in LA, and at the very end, I got, what's Visualize? And I don't take that for granted now. All right. So I'm going to try to just explain the value of the product, how I've come to use it, and a lot of the tools that I have learned in the process. It's cool animation. But my name is Chris. I work for Trimex Solutions. We cover the entire East Coast and over to Arkansas. But I got my beginnings, my first 3 years in the VAR channel, working for Cap Inc., which is a New England VAR, and one of the first. We're right in Solidworks' backyard. I learned from the best. My manager's father wrote Essentials, right? So I've got a lot of background. I don't have a whole lot of experience in industry. I've only been doing this for 5 years compared to my coworkers who've been doing it for 20. But I learned from those guys, and I've kind of piloted this Visualize product. So that's who I am. I'm a senior applications engineer, but I also consider myself a product communication specialist. It's fancy. I don't actually have that title. It's not on my business card. But I'm also well-versed in Composer. So any product that SolidWorks has where you need to do more than a screenshot to convey your designs is kind of what I've attached myself to. This presentation, again, I gave last year. I only had 60 minutes, though. And there weren't any negative reviews. However, I felt like I shorted the audience because I am going to give you all the tools, all the links. You could print this PDF and be fine. But I want to show you how to use the tools in addition to what they are. So that's going to be the purpose of this presentation. That's why it's 90 minutes. And the way it's going to be structured, I may, I often do things freestyle, by the way. But I may do some live stuff in between. But what I want to do is just get through these tools and then go through a practical scenario of using them. So we're talking about tools for great renderings that every Visualize user should know about. All right. So again, I'm self-taught. I have taught the Visualize class. The book only came out 6 months ago. What I'm going to do here is share a lot of the experiences that I've had and picked up on to make my job easier, because I perform these professional services for our clients. I've rendered horses and CT scanners. I've rendered bow and arrows firing. Man, I can't remember, medical devices and packaging, all of the different kind of spectrums of Visualize I found ways to be efficient with. So the first group of tools that I'm going to cover are appearance and texture resources. So if you're using Visualize stock right out of the box, you've installed, I'm a huge evangelist of the software. You have a lot at hand. You have HDRs, which are your lighting scenarios. You have appearances that you can drag and drop. It's fast, fun, and easy to use. But to step it up a notch, we use resources. We start getting into the tools that graphic artists use. That's what attracted me to Visualize the most compared to PhotoView, was that I can deal with different types of file types. I can render water, not moving, people, places, things. All right? PhotoView is a little harder to do that. And we have all of these resources with Visualize to make it photoreal really easily. After the appearances, we're going to look at HDR environments. HDRI just means high dynamic range image. It is not what's on your iPhone. It is a specialized image, and we'll cover the reasons for that. 3D model resources I described, where to find people and things. Right? If you develop a product that interfaces with a human, you could render that object onto a human arm. All right? Combining resources for photorealism, that's going to be the last piece where we kind of get all this together and we create an actual project. So again, we're going to start with appearance and texture resources. And by the way, at the end of this, we will have time for questions. I'm going to stay aware of the time, as long as Siri doesn't activate. All right, so appearance and texture resources. What do we have available to us? Well, I already went through all these, so we'll move forward. I also have to interrupt myself with this. Resources when you're searching online, and I was tiptoeing when I first started doing this, all right, because I was doing professional services for customers who were using these at trade shows. You cannot use certain models, appearances, and things if there are specific types of licenses on them. So you need to be very aware of what those are. There's editorial licenses, there's royalty-free licenses for all use. That's the one that you can use anywhere. Of course, you can purchase that right, but if you're accessing free things, which are definitely out there, just make sure that you can use them. I need to cover this right away because there could be legal action taken against you if you use someone else's image that someone worked hard to create. All right, so again, the appearance and texture resources. And again, this is not all a PowerPoint. It's mostly a PowerPoint, but it's so you can have this later and have everything you need in front of you. I'm going to talk about the Visualize Cloud library. This is one that is Visualize stock material, but it's not installed immediately on your machine. PBR appearances. By the way, I'm using Solidworks Visualize 2019 for this presentation, and I'm talking about a lot of new things that came out in 19, and that includes physically based rendering appearances. All right, we'll look at that. Third-party websites. These are the tools where I said you got to kind of be aware of the licensing, right? Algorithmic Substance Designer. I learned about a few of these things when the Solidworks Visualize product manager asked me to present on some of these. I'd never even heard of them. But these are amazing tools for creating your own appearances. And Nvidia MDL appearances, all right? We're going to look into those. Those are brand new. So the Visualize Cloud library, it's right inside Visualize. It is directly inside your Appearance tab. The difference is there is a, let me get back in here, come over this way. There's a tab that says Cloud next to it, all right? And as soon as you click on that, that's accessing the server, the Visualize server, and it has hosted appearances, all right? And they may be like carbon fiber and different types of plastics, things that aren't just installed by default. They probably do that so you don't wait 3 times as long to install the software. But those are available to you right from the interface. They're categorized just like the other appearances. As soon as you double-click them, they will appear in your standard library. This is maybe matter of fact, but if you didn't know about the cloud, that's exactly where you can access many more without even doing anything else that I present here. A little bit about PBR appearances. So this is not technically a resource. This is the materials, the appearances that you're going to be using for your resources. So PBR stands for physically based rendering. I'm not an expert on the science behind it. I am a mechanical engineer. This is my hobby. So that is a high quality appearance type that allows us to get really dynamic reflections. You start getting like oil fingerprints on surfaces, you get scratches, you get dust. You start adding hyper detail to your models and it just becomes realistic almost immediately. Along with that are what we call metallic and roughness workflows. That'd be for metal with rust and things like that. Specular and glossiness would be for more, like I said, kind of oils on plastic surfaces, things like that. All right. So third-party resources, another big piece here for those PBR appearances, all appearances in Visualize that have texture. So you can have green, blue, yellow, that's it. Or you can have different maps. We call them color, specular, alpha, and bump maps. Color is, you'll see a little bit later, the actual color of a wall of bricks, a brick wall. That's the color. Specular would be how the light interacts with that. Does it hit here and release less light, or is it shiny here and not here? That's how you get the variation in smudges, for instance. Alpha is just see-through. It's an alpha channel. So if you wanted to make a speaker mesh, you would assign an alpha channel and be able to see through the areas that are black. Bump maps are the illusion of bumps, height. You can get scratches to be raised. You can get plastic textures, molded, pebbled plastics to be raised. And I'm just going to mention these here. These are live links when you can download it later. Polygon.com is an absolute goldmine for these. You do have to pay a subscription for most of the appearances, but that's an absolute goldmine for these types of appearances. And they're seamless. Seamless meaning that all you're getting is a JPEG or PNG, whatever the case is, in a square format, and that has to repeat in all directions. So the seamless refers to where it begins on the left, it ends on the right, and then it can continue that, same for the top and bottom. Textures.com is another good one. Google Images, you can just search this, seamless textures, and you'll probably get a good amount. Again, pay attention to the licensing. PixPlant, I'm going to cover in more detail, and this is one that I learned of when I was asked to talk about a little more, but we're going to look at Polygon quick. Polygon, again, what I referred to as a gold mine for these appearances, is a huge library of these PBR sets. You're going to see on the skateboard that I color later that I chose a map of camouflage or fatigue, right? And I just searched for it right inside there and I got there. But if I want a more complex appearance like metal with rust or scratches, I can find that. And these are just little previews, right? There's an example of the color. And then I can just show you, we've got diffuse, we've got displacement maps, gloss, normal map itself, and reflection. So you're not going to use every one of these inside Visualize, and then you choose your resolution. You're not going to use every single one of these. It depends on the workflow you're going with. I talked about roughness and the glossy workflow. But you have all of those at your at hand. So this is PixPlant. PixPlant is really cool because you can definitely inside Polygon go ahead and purchase a pre-made set of these appearances. But with PixPlant, you can actually create your own. This is a third-party software. I think I have a 30-day free trial. I don't know how much it costs. I don't make money off of talking about this. But you'll see in a second from a screen capture how good this is. So from a standard photo, it would have to be high quality. All right, it would have to be high resolution for you to get a good end product. You can then generate all of those other maps that I just showed you. So here's an example. This is the software. You can just choose to upload an image and extract those maps directly from it. I've already got them done here, but this is the original color image. Right? It's a brick wall. And immediately it picks up on the elevations. It's using its own algorithm to figure out from the light and the dark and give you a bump map. And this software allows us to scale that, make it more drastic, less drastic, whichever direction you want to go. All right, you can get fine detail, and that would only be possible if it was a high resolution image, right? You need a good quality starting point. Garbage in, garbage out. This is an example of the specular. So how do those reflections interact with that? Is the white part of this image shiny, or is the red brick part of that image shiny? This is dictating that. This is the ambient occlusion map, which is very similar to specular. It is the brightness variation in the image. So I can drag it up, make it brighter, drag it down, make it less bright. But right now it's shiny. I don't want my bricks shiny. I can adjust that specular map. It has to do with the shininess. I draw that down, it'll make it less shiny, I push it up, and it makes it more shiny. And you essentially just stop when you're happy with it, right? I mean, I just eyeball things and they work out. So this is a little bit about the algorithmic substance designer. I practice saying that, right? This is a PBR material authoring software. Full disclosure, I do not know how to use this software, all right? It looks like to me when I was doing my research, this requires training from somebody. Unless you're an expert in other material creation software, this is a bit foreign to me. That's why I go to Polygon, because those experts have already done the work for me. But this is a really cool software, and it is used in the gaming industry and the CGI industry for like hyper-realistic textures on, I mean, you name it. You'll see some examples. Let's just move over. All right, so we need to build our appearance. This is just going to be a quick little time lapse because, again, this is not me. I pulled this off of their website. All right, but you essentially align all the maps. You create a workflow for these to interact with each other. All right, and the end result is going to give you, through your tweaking, you can see how complex that looks after the fact, right? You can create these appearances. This is how CGI artists at Pixar are doing this stuff. They're creating the rocks. They're creating the water surface. They're getting really, really hyper-realistic with this stuff. Right? And you can render that type of image in Visualize. You can't create it in Visualize, but you can absolutely import it and use it. All right, so this is Algorithmic Substance Designer. I needed to cover it. If this is part of what you need to do, this could be the right tool for you. And I'd like to stay in touch and have you teach me how to use it. It's not my job to learn that, unfortunately. But this is Nvidia MDL Appearances. Now, ever since 2019 came out, this has been available. It started out in like SP0, a little odd upgrade to SP1, and it's more robust. But essentially, these are physically based materials for rendering. This is a Nvidia proprietary type of material, and if you go to the Solidworks Visualize booth in the Partner Pavilion, they've got like, I think it's 2020 available, and they are able to do a lot more than I'm going to talk about here. All right, but these are high quality materials. Essentially, they allow for consistency across CAD platforms. It's non-biased to Visualize. It can be used in many different applications. That's one of the benefits of it. It's kind of a built-in zip file of its own intelligence and appearance. You can't edit directly, meaning that all you can do is drop it on. In the current state of Visualize SP1, 2019, you are not able to edit them. However, you have a few hundred to choose from, and many colors, variations. All right, but you can adjust their mapping, so you can make them bigger or smaller on the object. All right, so if you have metal plates, maybe corrugated steel, whatever the material you chose, you can control how big or small that is on the model. All right, and here's a link to download those. And if you are as much of a Visualize fanboy as I am, you should definitely get involved on the forum. That's the only way that, not the only way, but you can interact directly with the product managers and the developers and everybody who's paying attention to that. It's part of SolidWorks' employees' jobs to stay attentive to those. And this is where I learned about this stuff initially. So here's an example of MDL materials. All right, I've uploaded this. It was a download, and I just stuck it in a root folder so I could reference it. I dragged over a hexagonal metal. I dragged over just a regular kind of other appearance here, and we'll see. All right, there's no texture options. So I have to switch to part mode. This is just the workflow for now. It's going to change. But in part mode, you can choose how you want to wrap the wrapping technique on the object. So I chose box, which is the most generic one that fits most shapes. And here, we've got a wood appearance. Right, it's doing it all for me. I don't need to adjust specular. I don't need to adjust bump. It's all built in for me. So it's the most convenient drag and drop I've ever seen. When this is out, it's going to be just really easy to teach the software for sure. And here's an oil. Right, it's shining that purple, green, yellow from different angles all on its own. That's MDL appearances. And we're going to use these again at the last portion of the presentation. All right, so that's the appearance and texture resources. There are many more, all right, but I've kind of stuck. I've had a subscription to Polygon for a year now. I should probably cancel it. But I've got tons and tons of those appearances. You slowly build your library, you're not really going to need to eventually go out and find more because you can then customize the ones you already have. So let's take a look at HDR environment resources. And I'm going to explain the HDRI environment before I get too deep into it. I had already said that it's a high dynamic range image, but more specifically, it's a spherical image. So you've probably seen panoramic images online that kind of look skewed. It's because it's a sphere flattened out. This turns into a sphere. And what HDRI means is there are exposure values that have been layered on top of each other. So that means that if I take a picture of this room with my phone, I have a poor iPhone 6, but if I took a picture of this room and then I went into software and I raised the brightness, everything would just wash out. Or if I darkened it, everything would get really dark. With a high dynamic range image, I could lower the brightness and the lights. I could see the bulbs because of that much color information that's inside the image. And that's how we get realistic reflections in Visualize with zero effort at all. All right, so having covered that a little bit, this is what the sphere would look like. This is actually, I think I took it with me. This is a 360-degree camera. I'm going to talk about it in just a second. But you just pop this down. You have an app. You walk away. You snap 6 to 8 images at different exposures. One will look really washed out. Oh, actually, it's all my offices. Didn't realize that. I forgot about that. All right, so this is what's actually projecting light onto your model. This is how it works. You can see reflections. This is not live rendering. I just did this as kind of a cool little animation. But that's what I'm talking about when I refer to an HDRI. So we have, again, a lot of extras in the Visualize Cloud library. You do get probably 15 or so by default, but you've got another 15 or so left over. Third-party resources, where you can find those online. There's a lot of great resources. HDR Light Studio. I'm actually borrowing a clip from another VAR who did a CAD Dimensions, who did a great job on this. It's a paid software. I don't need it for my purposes, but his name is Jesse, he's done a great job, and I'm going to borrow some of his video. And then how to capture your own. It's just a little preview of using this camera. I'm going to put it back because I'll definitely forget it. It's not mine. All right, so this is just a similar slide. Essentially, you navigate over to that cloud. All right, I'll just do it here. All right, we're in Visualize. You've got your libraries for environments. Oh, I'm not connected to the internet, most likely. That's why, yep, that's why I have the PowerPoint, just in case. All right, you need to be connected to the internet or else you're not going to be able to access the cloud. That's kind of standard stuff. Maybe I could turn on the Wi-Fi hotspot. It's not important. If you're all satisfied with knowing that this works when you're connected to the internet, then I think we're all set. But essentially, you double-click on them. You see those green checks. Those green checks mean that they have been downloaded locally. So these have not. Right? You've got a bunch here, or I've got a bunch here that I haven't used. But as soon as you double-click them, they're green, and they'll be in your regular tab, your standard tab, which is up here. I can move that away. Right? That's just the local folder. I just put here, try combining it with a matching backplate. So a lot of these ones that you get from Visualize, they've also included 2D images taken by a photographer. You can rotate that sphere around the model and then position your image in the same orientation, and it looks like the object is inside that photo. It's a really, really fast, easy way for photorealism. You're essentially just tricking the eyes. You can achieve photorealism in a lot of ways, the difficult way, or just simply use these tricks. The HDR is one of the easiest ways to do that. So third-party resources, I'm going to look at a couple of them here. They are full of these HDRIs, right? You've got tons of them. Oh, that's not me, okay. Select from indoor, outdoor, and studio environments. So HDRIs could be as simple as a black sphere with white dots around, or it could be an outside scene with trees, or it could be a field or a canyon, whatever the case is, wherever you want to put your object. But HDRIs are not all created equal. That's an important piece to consider here. All right, so essentially, HDRIs are 100% dependent on the amount of exposure values. So it's the contrast that you're getting, how many pictures you've taken and layered. I mentioned how you'd be able to see that light bulb. If you only have 2 pictures, you're not going to be able to get that. So it actually lists this. They're called exposure values, and the more the better. All right, but just also know, I have some Visualize projects that have reached 2 gigs, one project file. And that happens because it's essentially just a zip file of everything that you've inserted into the project. So if you download a 500 megabyte HDR and you put it in Visualize, you've just increased your project by 500 megabytes. So that's something to stay aware of, and that's why I've ran out of hard drive space many, many times. But HDRI Haven, we're going to look at, and Polygon. Maybe not for this, but Polygon we just looked at. There was another tab for HDRI. All right, but we will take a look at HDRI Haven. This is one of the best resources I've found. He made them recently all free. You can navigate around, find indoor, outdoor scenes. You can browse them, right? So I'm happy with the scene. It's got a nice floor to the environment. This is going to project reflections and the light onto my model. All right, you can see some examples here. I'll go ahead and just pause it. You can see some examples at the top here that show how that environment would reflect off of glass, matte plastic, chrome, or a shiny plastic. right? It just gives you kind of some sample sets. And then over here, we have the choice of the resolution. So you don't need a super high resolution environment. If it's really poor resolution, I'd say you want to get it. I use 8K, but you can see those megabyte values. Remember, I mentioned that, right? I use about 8K when I work, and that allows it to stay crisp and actually look like an environment. If you don't choose a high one, you could probably actually see pixelation. All right, so you want to make sure that you're choosing a quality enough one. These are all 100% free and commercially usable, by the way. This guy, I don't know, he crowdfunded and just made them all completely free. And this has 12 EVs. That's high. That's 12 images that have been stacked on each other at different exposures. You choose the one you want, and it'll download to your computer, and you're ready to go. So HDR Light Studio, this is really cool. I haven't used it myself because I've found other techniques, but I know companies like Duracell, probably many car manufacturers who use this product, use this. Essentially, it's for those really nice kind of Apple commercial iPhone black backgrounds and light shining off of things, right? This is a way of tweaking that in. You can get that achieved with a HDR you find online, but this is essentially a live HDR creation software. When I move shapes around or add to my HDR on the left, on the right, it affects what's on the left, and you can see these update. So again, got to give full credit to Jesse Sprague, CAD Dimensions. He's just as versed in Visualize as I am. I borrowed from his YouTube video, all right, because he has gone through, I didn't show the whole video, but he actually shows you the physical lens enclosure and a real studio, and he's replicating that with this software. What he's doing is just creating artifacts. You can see up here, well, when we get back, what he's doing is creating artifacts that become the HDRI. So he wants a reflection here, he wants a soft reflection here. What he can do is just go through and adjust those shapes live, and Visualize will update immediately. So this was a good little example here where he wanted the left side of this to be impacted. So you just add another white cube and you adjust its height and size, and you just get it until you're happy, right? And that's it. Very, very cool software. There are lights inside Visualize. There are a lot of studio environments pre-made for you in Visualize, but if you, and I've done complete commercials for customers with a simple HDRI, but if you need to get really, really particular with your reflections, this is going to be a great tool for you. Again, that wasn't my video. I have to say that on the record. So this is something that I did with my company, how to create your own HDRI environments. We have a nice little webinar that we offer. That's free. I don't think it requires an email either. But essentially, you just create the 360-degree images, and you use Photoshop to combine them. And that's going to be saved out as a literal HDRI file type. It's a file type. It's not just referred to as an HDRI, and it's a JPEG. It's absolutely its own file type. So this is the Ricoh Theta S. They've come out with newer versions of it. I'm still not satisfied. It only goes up to 4K, and like I said, 8K would be even better. Especially, this presentation's not on it. Visualize has VR outputs, 360-degree images that you can look around with a headset. If you're expecting to see it realistically, you want to have it pretty high resolution. So this one's only like 2K, and it gets the job done. But there's a newer one, and there's even better products out there. This is the most affordable one and best reviewed, though. So essentially, it's just a matter of capturing it at different exposure values, right? Just, you won't be able to see the clouds if it's too bright, and you won't be able to see the light spots if it's too dark. But then you layer all those together, and it captures all those different colors, and it creates a 32-bit color gamut inside that image, and allows you to get really, really realistic reflections inside Visualize. All right, so that was the HDRI resources. All right, Visualize Cloud Library, you have more right inside Visualize than you might know about. The third-party resources I just covered were the HDRI Haven, and Polygon also has similar objects. HDRI Light Studio, and Capture Your Own, like I just mentioned. Right. Let's talk about the 3D model resources. This one I geek out over because as soon as I got into Visualize, I tried importing a Lamborghini. You may have seen that if you were here in the beginning. It takes models of different file types that SolidWorks technically can, but it facets them when you bring them in, like OBJ files, FBX files, STL files. You can import those directly into Visualize and not lose any of their fidelity. Because SolidWorks it's a great tool, but it's mathematical. It's very, linear. It needs to make sense of the geometry if you expect to put a cut through it, and that kind of sacrifices some model quality when you do that. But I rendered these. These were free models. The tree is amazing. All it is every single leaf is a picture with a leaf and an alpha map, so you can't see behind it. I've done Christmas trees for blogs, things like that. There's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, but it's really easy to apply. So before I get into those types of models, though, I want to talk about ones that might be more relevant to you, which would be mechanisms, things that may have been designed in SolidWorks, but you don't have the time to design. In a previous life, I was in robotics and automation for injection molding, taking the products out of the molds. And I was often going to Misumi and different vendors that we had to put together end-of-arm tools. I needed to get a mass calculation. I needed to get them all in there. Well, there are lots and lots of resources that SolidWorks provides. And since back in 2010, when I was using it, through the direct vendor sites, we have great websites through, or great access to vendor information and models through SolidWorks Resources like 3D Content Central. And brand new is My SolidWorks CAD Models. MySolidWorks.com is a great website if you haven't used it. CAD Models are now available there. We're going to look at some third-party resources, which is my favorite, and a little bit about scanning your own. I also am on the 3D scanner team. If you've stopped by the RTech booth, ask them to scan your face. They'll probably do it for you. And then maybe find me and I'll render you in a Lamborghini if you want. It's up to you. I'm offering. So I got to cover the 3D Content Central. This is great for both supplier and user-contributed models, right? But again, I think when you upload to it, you're kind of agreeing that it's public domain stuff, but just make sure that you can use those models in your renderings and things like that. But they are specifically in 3D Content Central, like I had mentioned with supplier parts, where there's complex part codes that correlate to the length of a linear actuator and the Z height and all of that. We're going to take a look. So essentially, if I want to find, for instance, right here, we're going to search for a piston. 3D Content Central, it's a free service, right? And I click on here, right? So now what I'm going to find is my different selections. This is just a configurator. And it's going to use eDrawings to give you a preview at the end of this, but you just choose it, it fills out its code, and you update the preview as soon as you've chosen this. Now, every object, every part or assembly is not going to be like this. SMC I used all the time. So you choose what model file you want, parts and assemblies. You could have just a drawing of it if you wanted, and you just download it. All right. McMaster has similar stuff, but this is all through SolidWorks, contributed by members and by these suppliers. You get pricing, you get the tolerances and everything from here. McMaster often does not employ good modeling techniques, which can overload your system with helical threads and stuff you don't need. They've kind of fine-tuned and purpose-made these models to be friendly with SolidWorks. Because I hear many, many times customers are, or users, sorry, you're not my customers. Users are just downloading off McMaster and keeping the threads on every single bolt and screw. That is a no-no unless you absolutely need it. So MySolidWorks.com has 3D models as well. It's in beta, but it's right there. It's called CAD Models. You click on it, and you're able to access supplier and user-contributed models. All right, so for instance, we can go through, just click on CAD Models. And once we've done that, we go and select from many categories that we want to search through. So I'm just going to scroll through, show a few of these categories, and take a look at the expansion of those categories. It gets even cooler. So you can search if you want, but I was very impressed with how they've categorized everything. I'm most interested in machinery most of the time. We'll take a look at that. All right, so from here, I want, let's see, let's pick one. I want this little pump housing. All right, so it opens up in eDrawings. I can view it. I can do anything that I can with eDrawings Viewer. So I can explode it, check out the internal components, make sure it's the one I want. All right, this is not rendering right now. What we're using is the tools to get products in for our renderings. All right, the more satellite parts and things that you're using to complement your design, the more realistic you'll be able to get. Right, you just agree to the community rules and accept and download it. Third-party resources for 3D models. This is where we start getting the non-CAD models. These are the ones that were designed with ZBrush or some of those other CAD packages that can do stuff that I don't want to mention their names, right? But essentially, those outputs would be OBJs, FBX, STL. All right, these are file types that are made with like NURB modeling that are, you saw it with, I forget the name of it now. One of the products that GP announced is, I think, a redo of the Industrial Designer product where you can just push and pull. It was the remote control. There's no parametric nature to it. It's just modeling clay. All right, and that's the type of models that you can get from here. But they're also not created equal. Just like in HDRI, with the amount of levels of exposure, you need to pay attention to the amount of polygons. You're going to end up with you know, a 1990s video game character if you choose a really, really low poly model. Or you can get something really, really high, and there are levels of resolution that you can kind of stop at, like a HD monitor. There's a limit to where you can actually discern the difference between 4K and 8K and 12K, right? So there's a sweet spot, but higher resolution is better. You're going to get, when you zoom in on it, you're not going to see it facet. You're going to see it nice and smooth. All right, and Turbosquid is my favorite one to use. I've bought horses from them. I've bought people from them for $100 each, but I'm talking about 3D models, not actual living things. All right, so there's thousands of free and paid professional 3D models, but I'll show in a minute. You got to make sure if it's free that you have the right to use it. I had to pay for the horse. Continually improved model library. So it's being contributed to by many, 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 many artists all the time, and you can buy these models from them. You select from a range, again, of the low and high poly models. So here's an example of that. This is turbosquid.com. You can go in and choose from many, many different categories. When I started self-teaching, I did cars, and I think I've been indirectly slighted on the forums for just rendering Lamborghinis. But you know what? I worked on that Lamborghini so long that it looked indiscernible from a real Lamborghini, and I learned quite a bit. So then I expanded and started messing around with these models. Right? You got just about anything here. Furniture's a big one if you're into any kind of architectural engineering design, things like that. But the possibilities are limitless. I mean, it's anything you found in a video game or a movie is modeled and accessible through here. So here's a way to search the free models. This is a tip, right? Go ahead, search what you want. I have a customer who makes grocery store, high-end grocery store kind of fixtures, but they want to render it for their client to give them the idea of how it will look with the fruit and everything there. When I met this client initially, I'll just pause this quick. When I met the client initially, they were modeling apples and wrapping as spheres, and it got the job done, but I'd say it looked like it would have been done 10 years ago, right? You can come on here and access free apples, right? And drop them right into Visualize. So here's a few examples, right? You can go through, you can see leaves, different types, you can have whole packs, but here's how to access the free ones. You go to the price filter and you go to free. It's like one of the only websites ever that has that. And then from there, you just look around, and this one's fairly high quality. You click around, you can see what it looks like, you can see the mesh right there, and there's the product. So what we need to pay attention to, though, are the exchange formats. Because there are lots of different models. Do not pay for a model that's of a type only available in something that's not compatible with Visualize. You'll be wasting money. You might be able to request, I think there's some points in here to request from the designer another file format, but I wouldn't depend on that. OBJs are super friendly, STLs are, and so is FBX, and there's probably a few others, but OBJ is like 95% of what I work with. Right, so that's generally what I look for. You need to make sure that, we're going to move to this next little piece here. You can use it though, and the royalty-free license for all extended uses is the one that allows you to use it anywhere. So it's free, and you can use it on a trade show booth or a commercial, and they don't care. All right, so here's other things that I've rendered and visualized. People. I forgot. That was the one another project. I think it was for the same company. It was a CT scanner for a horse, and then they had one for a human. It was complex motion, and they needed to show him being scanned. I needed to find a patient. It was kind of an awkward conversation of what do you want that patient to look like? Female, male, how are they clothed? Are they naked? I don't know. I haven't had a CT scan. But I was able to find this gentleman in a gown. The woman on the left was a free model, hyper-realistic. I'll be upfront, hair and fur and things like that are not currently easily possible in Visualize. Right? You can get away with the leaves and techniques like that, but hair and fur, so I actually kind of hid her hair there. It's all in a bun in her hat. There's the horse, right? And it's got the specular maps, it's got the bump maps, so it's got veins. As I turn that horse in 3D space, you can see the sheen across its body. Right? It needed to be really realistic because I was zooming way in on when you scan a horse, the main concern and the purpose for this demonstration I did for the customer was for showing the clearance, because a horse can be skittish. We need to make sure that that's scanning and not getting anywhere near the horse as it's doing it. So I was like tight on the legs and showing this go up, and that got that across really well. Here's the apples, right? You can just copy paste them many, many times. And even in 2019, I'm not showing this. In 2019, you have physics in the SOLIDWORKS Visualize Professional, where you could just put all these apples up in the air, turn on physics, and they'll all just drop. And they'll fall naturally. I just moved these and made them look realistic. Water, fluid. This is a huge one. It's not going to be moving. We don't have that capability. But if you needed to show a fountain that's kind of in a freeze frame, you need to show, they sell models of jugs or milk pouring water droplets splashing up. You can access all of that with this too. There's even landscapes. So this is a free kind of low quality model, but if you have a product that's in the air, a drone or something like that, you can actually, it's basically bringing in a whole video game environment into Visualize. You scale everything down, but you can have a sun. That's what I have here. I have a sun study passing over the mountain range. Right? You can get really, really, really creative with that. And that pretty much gets rid of the need for an HDR environment because you've got physical models. Nature, that's where I'm getting a little silly here. Fancy nature, right? Anything you want. Furniture, fancy furniture, messy furniture, right? If you need to render the inside of a room, you can get it looking really, really good. All right, now we'll cover GrabCAD. So GrabCAD you may probably be familiar with, and their company has exploded into many directions in a good way lately. But its core beginnings were user-contributed model database where you could go and download free models. And that's where I started messing around with models in PhotoView 360 a while back. Right, I'll show that car because I really enjoyed working with it. But it's a wide variety of categories. You do also need to make sure you have permission and things like that. Great for questions, tutorials, and design challenges. It's got a lot to it, even more. Here's a little example of searching it. So essentially we have a login that you would use. My password is ... I'm kidding. But you just go ahead and search. You can choose whether it's filtered by the most current and what category you want and what software. This is not just SOLIDWORKS models. This is well beyond that. But with 3D Interconnect, you can use just about anything now, right? So I love Nissan GTRs. I've got one in my, not my garage. I live in an apartment with rich people. I'm not one of those people. But I love that vehicle. I chose this. This is made by another gentleman named Chris somewhere in Europe and highly detailed. I mean, comparatively now, this is a very poor looking model. But for the time in 2014, it was awesome. It's fully mated, it had a fully modeled engine, the doors could gull wing up and everything. So I had a lot of fun learning how to render in PhotoView 360 with this model. But you just download it, and you can upload your renderings to complement that contributor and all of that. So, where are we at? 11:13. We've got a good amount of time to use the software. All right, I'll play this first animation one more time. And what I'll do is we'll do this. Let's make it a little bigger. So there's a lot going on with different things I've used here, but I'm going to point out a piece of this. And you may have seen this in the morning session. They borrowed some of the clips here. Let's see if I can turn that down. Yeah, good. So essentially I used a lot of these appearances. So that kind of granular texture on the road was a PBR appearance. I have, you know what, let's just pause it and talk about these things as we go. Right, so you can see the road here. The road has inconsistencies. It's not representative of the real road that I drive over every single day. I'm not sure if it's got better or worse infrastructure than this. It depends on the time of year in Boston. But I needed something realistic, so I found this road appearance. This is not a hyper-realistic model. I kind of whipped this together, but that helped me achieve some good realism from the top with the shadows and everything like that. Moving along a little bit further, this was a modeling contest that, not a modeling contest, it was for the resellers in North America, and I got lucky enough to win the overall contest using, one of the examples was this model. It was a photorealism model challenge, all right? And essentially I just went to every degree to get dust on the tape, to get waviness on the tape, to get scratches, to get smudges. I didn't bring it with me because I probably wouldn't have gotten through airport security, but the secret that I used to get the photorealism was having an actual Scotch tape dispenser in my hand. I looked at it and I wasn't satisfied until the scratches lined up, right? One tip for photorealism is make it look poor, actually. I mean, when you render something perfectly, it doesn't look real. You have to add some surface imperfections, add some ripples, add some, you can't really see it from this angle, but it's got the orange peel to the paint. Everything just being flat and sharp and shiny, it does not necessarily lead to photorealism. And here, I'll zoom out, we'll go to here, sorry. This is what we're going to be working with, actually. I'll show you exactly how I created this. This was, I think, what won me the contest. I didn't model this, but I did modify it to have kind of springs that were flexed. But there's a lot going on here. There's an imported model from, if you haven't messed around with it, there's Paint 3D in Windows 10. And there's a lot of FBX models in there. And I just borrowed this from there. And it came with that wrapped appearance on it already. It's not super realistic, but for a showcase, I think that does the job because you're focusing on the model. All right, so we'll be taking a look at that exact model. This is a kayak that my coworker designed and built. We've got a series of webinars on it. If you're a boating or kayak fan, you will want to be in touch with my coworker who builds a lot of these. All right, it's got 3D printed cross sections. His name is Andy Jaski. I just have to give him a plug for that. But I put the plastic on the outside, which ruined my hands for about a month. This is an example of a water environment, and it has the specular, it has bump, it has a lot on the water surface. It's not super realistic. I could have done a better job, but it was all free stuff, so I didn't feel like paying for stuff. But essentially this water, and in the animation I actually gave it kind of a rocking to it. If you look, you can actually see the water slowly rising up and down on there. And it just gave a little bit more realism to it moving around. I also have the sun setting with the sun study, and I just randomly threw my products in there. I actually did this in 45 minutes. But here's a model of the car that you saw. That one is purchased from Polygon, purchased from Turbosquid. This is using the 360 camera. We went to Solidworks headquarters. We, without their permission, took a picture right on the front. We did that so it would be a surprise. This is you actually have access to this Camaro. This is the stock model that you get in the sample files, so feel free to use it. And then this is a model I got for free. There's a reason they didn't use this, even though it's the best looking one. I don't have rights to that model. I made that very clear before they borrowed my clips that I do not own this. So if somebody in this audience did, they would sue me. But that is actually a 3D scan of my face, if you look. So this is what I could throw you in this one, I could throw you in a blue one, whatever you want. Making it move would take 6 hours and at my site in Boston, so not offering an animation, but if you wanted a little image, I have cards. It'd be cool, because I'm a nerd and that's how it goes. All right, but that's pretty much what I'll take you through. All right, so let's get into visualize. I've got a little list here to keep myself organized, because I'm not going to be switching back to the PowerPoint very much. We'll take a look at this project. So I'm just going to hide a few things before we get going. You know what I'll do? I'll drop in just a standard environment. Let that update. So when you've used Visualize, you may see it looking like this. So this is the stock HDRI environment. If we zoom out, this is an HDRI environment. It's just a sphere, and it's got just kind of a pattern of colors on it. It's got contrast, high contrast, which allows it to give you some nice shining and shadows and everything like that. And if I zoom in on it, we can see kind of the look that it has. And you can even rotate this. I use hotkeys, but you can see as I rotate this sphere, it impacts the reflections. Not as much as I'd like. These are the ones that are available to me right here through Visualize. I've had a lot of luck with the warehouse one. Warehouse, you can turn these off, by the way. You don't need to use them as a background. I can simply go to my scenes, and instead of environment, I choose color. And I can choose whatever color I want. It doesn't really matter because you can save it without a background and put it on any color later, right? But what I'm doing is getting those reflections of that warehouse. And it does a good job because there's a lot of bouncing light in that environment. So I can rotate this around and just get kind of some nice kind of tight shots with some reflection. Right, that looks pretty good. Right, whatever you want. But let's take a look. So I have included in my library some of those downloaded appearances from HDRI Haven. Right, I actually showed the exact one that I'm going to switch to, but one of them is Autumn Crossings. So this gentleman is from Europe, I forget which country. So most of the HDRIs are from Europe. Rome, Italy, I mean, everywhere in Europe. He just travels and this is his one job. But what I did was I borrowed this HDRI. All right, and it's just of a wooded scene. And this is an off-road skateboard, so it fits to be in the woods. And I didn't do anything to this environment other than raise the brightness just a bit. I dropped this into Visualize and it immediately gave me these reflections in this color. All right, it looks really, really good in that environment, if I don't say so myself. All right, but there are others that we can access. So where is it? I must not have put it in here. So let's just do it again. I've got these saved. I'll pop this in here. You just drag in new environments and it gives you a completely new set of reflections. Right? This one here is more of a jungle-like scene, more summertime, right? And you can see these nice dramatic reflections on there, just generated from the HDRI. Right? Your Scenes tab right here is where you access all of those after you've dropped them in. All right? I made up commando boards and things like that, so that's not a real thing. If you want to buy it, it doesn't exist. However, I just do want to cover a little bit of how we can manipulate these environments, because a lot of them might not be perfect out of the gates. These are, but some of them might not be. So I'll cover just a little bit about their properties so that you know how to use them once you download them. What you do is you come over to the Scenes tab and you click on the environment. The green check means it's the one that's active, because you can change properties of an inactive environment. You do that accidentally, you're not going to see an update, and when you switch back to it, you're not going to have what you used to have. So the basic, I think this will work. Yep. All right, the basic options that you have, there's a general tab, and the first one is background. Well, you can rename it, but the background type, you can remove the background or keep it. Then you could choose a color if you chose that. There's brightness to it, and this slider is where the HDRI really shows its brilliance. When I make it dark, it naturally makes it dark. When I make it brighter, it doesn't oversaturate or undersaturate it, and I'll show that. You can also rotate it. So let's take a look. Right? I can increase the brightness. Right? If I zoom out a bit, and I get my camera that has bloom on it. That's not part of this presentation. We'll turn that off. But there, I mean, the background doesn't look much worse with that brightness changed. So we'll go back here and just lower that. All right? Actually, I'll pop our original one back in here. All right, this is at the brightness I like it, and you can just rotate that to look the way you want. Now I have this floating in air. I could certainly put that on the ground, all right? There are options to do that. It won't really make sense in this case, so I'll just do this quick. All right, here's a copy of that. You can copy paste models. So the reason I'm doing this is to show you how to maybe position this on the ground if you wanted to, because there are advanced options for these environments as well. You have, again, brightness. Gamma might be something you have to change. The person who created these images, you know, they're making them for more photography scenarios, so you might need to change kind of the amount of contrast in it. Gamma takes longer than most things to update because it's doing a lot with the image. So that's why I'm waiting. The higher the resolution of that image, my computer's working very hard. The higher the resolution of that image, I'm just going to put something underneath it so it doesn't overheat. Would my phone be a good idea? Here, we'll just use this. And if you want to talk about system requirements and hardware specs, I'm happy to do that as well later. So here we are. All right, you can adjust the gamma, which is its own property, but you just dial it in to what you want. And then what we can do is flatten the floor. So right now it's a sphere. Right? But what you can do is flatten the floor of an HDRI environment. Now, it's not going to look perfect right away. This one actually does look pretty good. But when you flatten the bottom of a sphere, this is what happens. Right? If you want it to look more realistic, we have a few other options that we have to adjust. Those would be the height of the floor and the size of the environment. So the literal size of this sphere in relation to the size of the model. So what we do is we come over, we have it flattened. First of all, you can flip the whole image to the other side if you want. Probably shouldn't have clicked it because it takes us a little bit to update that. I'll be patient. All right, so all it's doing is inverting the image left and right. But if you have street signs and text and things like that, it's all going to be reversed if you do that, so be aware. But here's an example of the height. So I just adjust this height slider, and it gives me, it's easier to kind of conceptualize this in preview mode actually. So this height slider is going to adjust it. And I like to just zoom in and kind of investigate it. Right, you want the floor to look pretty real. I mean, it's blending pretty nicely, I'd say. Right? You just adjust that height until you're satisfied with it. If you make it too shallow, it starts to look weird, but I think we're just about there. All right, so that's pretty much it. All right, you also have the size of the environment though. So if we kind of zoom out a bit more and look at the size, make that smaller, make that bigger, and I would probably do that while you're inside the environment to get an idea of how that impacts the end result. Oop, wrong one, I was selected on the wrong one. How about that? All right. There you go. There you go. That looks pretty good to me, I'd say. All right, now you just have to position the model. This is just a little trick. This is not about how to use the environment. However, there are nice tools available. Everything you click on, whether it's the environments on the side or cameras or model, you get the properties for it. You've got general, which just allows you to make that see-through or not, or hidden. And then you have transform. This is a tab that I am very, very frequently in when I first start a project. If you export from SolidWorks, it may not be in the exact position you want it. So what you do is you use these tools. This is literally the very first thing I do when I start a new project. What I'll do is I'll click center. Let's actually zoom out. Center, which centers it on the sphere, and you click snap to floor, and it will snap it to the bottom. Right? Now, this one has some extra stuff because of the wheels. So we can use this tool up here called object manipulation, and it just gives us a triad, and you kind of just pull that down. You can see it go underneath there, right? I didn't bother bringing in a model that wasn't tweaked, so this is going to look a little odd, right? But that's all right. That's all right. I could actually fix that, but I'm not going to do that here. Why not? Let's try this. Here is an imported model from Microsoft Paint 3D. I can get creative with this and maybe submerge this below the floor. Right? You just kind of get tricky with it. But I'm not seeing my manipulation arrow. It's not conveniently located. So here's another little tip. When you click on a model, you can adjust the pivot center. If you have like a bar with a hinge on each end, you might not want to pivot it on the center. You might want to pivot it about one of those connector points. So you can move it around if you want, but I'm just going to choose, instead of environment, I'm going to choose model. So it was originally centering itself on the environment, the whole sphere, but now it's on the model, so I can see that nice and easy. And for instance, I might just pull this, push it out, pull this down a little bit more. Oop, maybe do one of these and push it in. Good enough. I'll Control-C, Control-V, and I'll just go ahead and move that over to the other side, maybe rotate it. So this one's obviously a little bit higher up. Something like that. All right. Now let's take a look at how that looks. I'm going to switch over to my accurate rendering mode, and oop, that's not below the floor. I don't know how that happened. It should be below the floor. It usually clips it when you go below the floor. However, I could get creative with a plane. I'm not going to do that here. All right, that's what you get for freestyling. That's not what the purpose of my goal was. I'm going to phrase this in terms of what I did and why I did this project initially. This was for a rendering contest, and it was specifically for an interactive image that was going to be output for a product proposal presentation. I was just putting on the shoes of you guys, the customers, the users. So essentially, what I did, we're going to hide these two. I'm going to disable them. Another little tip is the fact that when you hide objects inside Visualize, it's different than disabling them. I've just noticed in some projects I've done where you export the assembly from SolidWorks and all you have is like springs and little components hidden. The polygons and the software's still accounting for their existence. So you might even see some artifacts of things now and then. So disabling, which is on the General tab, will pretty much eliminate them. It's like a suppression versus a hide in SolidWorks. All right. So what I'm going to show is the mountain board that I have up in space. And the reason I did this was to create a nice rotating 360 image in the end. All right. What I'll do is show my finished ground piece. So I did the very same thing that I did when I positioned it in the floor. I copy-pasted, I moved them. The cool part about this is that I have them as, I think, groups. Yep. They blend into each other really well. I found that out accidentally, but you can mess around with these and make it look like a real kind of rugged environment. I've seen other ones with snow, with footprints and sand, and this is just kind of a cool way to represent it. If I zoom close in on this, there's actually like little tree roots and things like that. So I've put my model into a setting that immediately makes it more realistic to us. If this were to be an Apple commercial, I'd want to have it floating in space. That's great, but I wanted this to be a little more engaging. So that's what I did. Now, I'm going to cover a little bit about the PBR appearances. The PBR, which is physically based rendering appearances, are accessed from, well, you can create them from scratch, but I've already got some, so I'll just use one here. I'll go to my appearances, and I've got PBR. I can't find it. Thought I had it on there. Doesn't matter. I'll just create a brand new one for you guys. So essentially, we have this right here. If I go to my appearances and we take a look, I'll go ahead and hide this model so we're not focused on the ground here. And I'll go ahead and hide the environment for just a moment so that we can see a little more clearly. All right, so I got creative with the appearances on this board. All right, I made this stuff up. This is all fake, like product pitch. Again, it was just a pretending that I was a customer and participating in this contest. All right, so you see that camouflage appearance. I used that, and then I overlaid that with a circular kind of dimpled appearance. And you can use this as a PBR. I may have, if we look at this carbon fiber, the carbon fiber looks really good. Oops, come over. This carbon fiber looks pretty good. If I click on it with my appearance mode, take a closer look. All right, we've got a general tab. Now I only have it as a paint, but I'll show you a little bit more. You can make this a PBR material. All right, and what PBR does is it allows you to access the metallic roughness and the specular glossiness properties. Now what that means is it's giving you texture options. So yes, there's a lot of options here. I can make this metallic or less metallic. I can make it rough. I can add a clear coat to it. All right, this isn't metal. Make it more rough in a clear coat. You can add transparency and make it more shiny with an index of refraction. That's what IOR is. All right, so go to texture. We see color. Zoom in on this. Color, metallic, roughness, and alpha. Now I don't have immediate access to metallic and roughness, but those would be the same type of images that you saw. All right, so like in the brick example, I should say. You just double click on these, you search for the file, and you'll be ready to go. Again, I don't have the particular map I need. You can mix and match things. If you want the metallic to be a that's specular there. Let's change the workflow. We'll come over and change it from metallic to specular. It looks fairly similar, but it gives us a whole new set of options. It now says specular here, and it is actually using it. I do have one. But if I change that, I can change that to a cell leather. It changes the reflections on it. Oops, sorry. I want to get close. So this is how light is interacting with the surface, right? This is a specular map, and I can enable that or disable that, right? The fact that there's no specular map in a specular workflow means I'm not getting any reflection. So you would choose a different workflow if you don't have a specular map. But you can control the brightness of that specularity, and you can see the impact that that has. All right, you have color, you can make that brighter or darker as well. All right, you just mess around with these, and just to cover, let's say that this is a good appearance. Maybe you're making some type of odd new material that I'm not sure or know about. Right, what you can do is save these, and that's hugely helpful. If you've spent the time to customize this and get it to look the way you want, you should export that and save it as a local file. And the way to do that is right up here. Export. You click on export and you can save the appearance. And all you have to do is add it. Yeah, I've got all my appearances here. We'll put this in PBR material. I do have a PBR materials folder. Carbon fiber. Save it. It gets saved in there, and now I can drag and drop with that. Give it a second. This has the save time of saving a large image set at the same time. This is a pretty good computer, but I actually opted for the smaller one because I was sick of carrying 5 pounds on my back. Anybody have an M6800 Dell or something like that? Yeah, it was one of the best upgrades of my life to switch to one of these. All right, so let's try to find those PBR appearances again. Here we go. I have some serious faults. I cannot spot people in a crowd, and I have a very tough time finding specific words within lists. I don't know what the problem is. It might be something in a medical journal. I don't know. But we found it. We are here. Let's take a look at some of these PBR materials that I already have preset. So we've got a metal zinc blue. If I click and drag this over, and I drop it on here, oops, sorry, we can see that it has some of those specular, this is actually the metallic roughness workflow. All right, now it's not scaled correctly. There are many, many mapping techniques. I'll cover this for just a second because they are hugely important to getting the texture to look real. So essentially, you need to choose a mapping technique: box, planar, spherical, radial, cylindrical. Perspective just basically lays the flat image from the angle you're looking at it, which can look real, but you have to update that because as you rotate, the perspective is going to change. But the point is if you have a flat object, you can choose planar. If it's a sphere, you choose sphere. If it's a cylinder, you choose radial or cylindrical. And if it's on a circular face, like a brake caliper or a used rotor, you can use radial. But box is kind of your coverall. All right, so box kind of fits most odd shapes. It won't be perfect all the time, but the better seamless appearance you found, the better that's going to end up looking. So for instance, we can scale all of these parameters. I can position it, I can rotate it, I can scale it in the XYZ, or I can just scale it all together. So I pull this down, I'll do the faster technique here. If you go too small, you'll start seeing the tiling, most assuredly. Bring this down, 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 down. That was too small. There we go. All right, so now we've got, I apologize for doing that, a different PBR appearance on there. All right, so that's great. Now, let's look at the MDL appearances. MDL, again, you have to download. There's the link in the PowerPoint. But essentially, these are uploaded and installed on your machine, and I've got a folder for those MDL appearances. I can choose metal, and there's a cool hexagonal metal. Let me find that. Pop it right on. So if we look really close, I think the scaling for this is pretty small, right? You can see that res up as I do this. Now, it'd be cooler, I think, if this was bigger, the scale. And this is why I wanted to cover the MDLs, because right now as it exists, you have to scale it not from the texture properties. If I click on here, there is no texture mapping or texture options. It's because it's a new technology. It's not the traditional type of sets of images that create a map. All right. What you can do, though, is come over to here and choose Part Selection Mode. So if you're not too familiar with Visualize, there are many ways to select in the model. There's the yellow one right here, which is the model itself. That's how I move the skateboard around. Part is, depending on how you've imported, going to move them more granularly. Right? You can move a bolt around, you can move the washer, whatever the case is. Groups, it could be like a subassembly from Solidworks type of thing. That's how it kind of correlates. And appearances. So I need to choose Part, though. Part will allow me to access many of the options for that, but interestingly enough, I actually can access texture mapping from there, and I can choose whether it's box, planar, whatever the case is, and I can adjust the scale as well. So I pull that up, you'll see the scale change, pull it down, and it'll get smaller, right? That looks pretty cool, I'd buy that, right? So that was the MDLs. I'm going to leave some time for questions in a second, but we're going to finish this off with one more tip here. We're going to show the environment. So that comes back over the Environment tab, and I'll show it. And I'll also go ahead and show the ground that I have created. All right, so the reason I put this in midair was because I wanted to have a camera angle that actually kind of fooled you into thinking that the ground was this object, so that when you look in the background, all you see is kind of continued foliage. But if you want a rotation animation, this is a quick little trick. If you want a rotation animation, you need to establish the center of the rotation, the pivot point. And you do that with an Alt, Control, and a right click, and it will center the pivot point of that rotation. So for instance, it's often helpful to actually just kind of come up, I'll click like right here, and now it will pivot about that point. Right? And if you have ever seen the interactive images, you've probably seen them online if you've gone shopping for different products like computers and glasses. If you buy those online, you'll see a little image that you can twist and see it from all angles. That's exactly what I did with this. But you can also just create a camera animation. All right, I'll show that maybe real quick. It's called rotation animation. This camera does not, oh, it already does have one. I'll show you. Let's go with this camera. All right, so it's the same thing. What you can do to create an animation is this is in Visualize Pro, is come over, you right click on the camera, and you can add a focus rotation animation. Focus rotation makes the camera move around the object. Rotation animation makes the object move around. All right, so they're two different things. If you want the camera to be static and have the thing rotate, you choose rotation animation. But I choose that, and it actually creates, down here, this line item, automatically rotating it. And the cool part is if it's not perfect, like it's not on the correct pivot, nothing you do will affect that. So I can come over and just reassign a center. Oop, let me get out of here. You know, we'll just go back with this one. Right? You reassign the center, and it'll start looking the way you want. Right? I can kind of move that around and get it looking right. All right, and again, we do have another scene that we can use just to fool around if you want to change the way it looks. All right, and I think we have this a little too bright. Bring that down. Right, and then we'll go ahead and add one of my appearances. For my presentation, I gave many different versions of the board. I had green, I had blue, I had pink for the whichever crowd would like pink, red, white, and I named them all creative names like the Arctic Destroyer and things like that. All right, so that's how we do it. Now it's still too bright. You just keep toning that down. It'll start looking pretty good. All right, so that's basically the ins and outs of using those tools. All right, I'll open it up to questions. We've got about 14 minutes. I'd feel free to ask anything about anything related to Visualize. What do we got? I'm going to repeat your question so that everybody can hear, and it's also going to be recorded. So,
awesome.
Be careful with what you ask.
So you rotated about a center.
Yep.
What would be needed to rotate it, your visual through a path?
So you create the path. Essentially, you create keyframes. This is a nice automated right-click option, but essentially, if I were to, let me go ahead and just copy-paste the camera so that we can start with a good one. And I'll delete this animation. All right, so we're on this camera now. So what we can do is just right-click. So we have a timeline down here. This is Visualize Professional. I have to be clear about that. We have a timeline down here, and where it's positioned is where it will create a keyframe. You can hit the letter K, but essentially this is a keyframe telling it where the camera is at this moment in time. Also, the depth of field, every other property in that camera is captured with a keyframe, and you see it will create one. So I can then come over to the 8-second, well, we'll just make it short, the 4-second mark, and just move it, and it has auto keyframing on. So I can like kind of come in here maybe, and you can see it transition between those. That's how you would do it. And just to give you a little more of a clue, there's also properties for each of these keyframes. And you have a default one that you can set in your settings, but these are set to smooth. You can make it linear, It changes the icons a little bit. We'll turn the in, the out, and the in of the next one to linear, and you'll see how it just moves directly. It doesn't go ahead and kind of naturally move around in a spline. It just goes here to here. All right, any other questions? Yep.
Yeah, so on the car and on your video, I noticed you had your signature block on there. What was your technique to make the signature?
The signature?
Yeah, the signature on the back of the car and the
Yep.
video?
Yeah, I do that because I try to make it impossible to Photoshop my name out. But my last computer was just a touchscreen Dell, and I think I have like every software. So I can't remember which one it was, but it's similar to, it's not Photoshop, it was a cheaper version, Snagit, I think. You can create, I just wrote my name with my finger, and then I saved it with an alpha channel. And so all it is a JPEG without a background. That's it. And if you make it white, the nice part is you can make it a decal and adjust its color to anything you want to. Good question. Anything else? Yep. Sorry, can you speak up a little bit?
Can you show that pivot trick again?
Yeah. How to get it centered? How to move it away from center? Oh, you mean the manipulator to get it so when you move it around, it's in the center of the object, or?
Pick the point that wasn't in the center and you rotate it around that.
Oh yes, yes. Yep. So going to be taking a look at how to assign a center point for your pivot. I'll go ahead and delete this animation so we're not messing around with that. But essentially, right now it's centered. But if you want it to pivot about something else, maybe this tire, you hold the Control, the Alt key, and you right-click. It's kind of an Easter egg, but now it's going to rotate about that tire, like that. So if I want to rotate about, let's see, just the logo, like that'll help you get in real close and just do a kind of a sweep animation or something like that. Any other questions? Everybody wants to get out early? That's fine with me. Lunch is around the corner, right? Well, thank you for coming. I have to do this though. We have to switch back to the PowerPoint or else I'll get in trouble by Solidworks. They're listening. One second, let me go to the end here. I want to remind you about the surveys, say thank you, and the questions were great. But right here is what I have to show you. Essentially, there are surveys available through the app. The app is great, by the way. I built my own schedule to remind me of when I have to present, but also to see the other presentations. But please take a look at those surveys. It's always great feedback, and it determines, if you all give me a poor vote, I'll never be able to present again. So I don't know, maybe be a little light, but I appreciate you coming, and I have business cards if anybody was interested in staying in touch. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.